Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Vikings First and SKOL. I am Sally, the host of Skoldiers and Spice. And I don't need to tell you, we are only days away from the biggest Vikings-Lions matchup ever. And not only that, it's historical for a couple other reasons. For one, it's the first time that two 14-2 teams are going to be facing off for the number one seed in the playoffs. And one of them's going to have the number one seed and one of them's going to have the number 5 seed. So there is a ton at stake there. The Lions have, well, there's a ton of talking points. For one, the Lions have a ton of injury woes. That's gaining a lot of attention. Are the Vikings going to be able to put up enough points to outscore the highest scoring offense in the league? And it's also, on top of that, this has kind of been buried under all of the other headlines, but it's TJ Hockenson's first return to Ford Field since he was traded in 2022. Also, his first game against them since he was injured last year in week 16. But we'll talk about all of that. I've got two of my friends, or foes, I suppose, Will Rock and Riley O'Brien. The last time I talked to these guys in October, it was another, what we thought was going to be possibly the most historical matchup when both of these teams were undefeated. And so much has happened since then. So I am going to get their thoughts tonight on what they think about all of these things, but also the dirty player accusations, emotional locker room speeches, and much more. So let's get into it. Hello, you guys. Hi, Riley. Hi, Will.
Hey, how's it going, Sal?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having us aboard tonight.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you guys were available. As I was saying, I last talked to you both in October. You guys are both Lions fans, obviously. And back then, though, I knew you guys both individually. And since then, you have come together. You're collaborating. Why don't you fill me in on what's been going on?
Well, Riley, why don't you start? Because you're the one that really started this whole thing. So why don't you take it away, man?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do the honors there. It's kind of cool to be in a room with both of you guys. The way that I came to know both Sally and Will was through the Talking Football podcast, of which I'm a part, along with Justin Treese, Austin Cunningham, and Dan Kiefer. And both Sally and Will were people whose work I admired from afar. And so I reached out to them and asked them if I could do a one-on-one interview with them. They were both gracious enough to give me some of their time. Had very enjoyable conversations with them. And so just kind of formed friendships from there. And then the more I spoke with Will, does a great show every morning, the Rise and Grind morning show on his channel, I just was listening as a fan. And we just stayed in contact. And eventually I think I bugged him enough, like, hey, man, can I come on your show? And finally he just said, all right, go get a mic upgrade, which I've got. And so... yeah, the Talking Football podcast is going under his network. It just worked out beautifully, kind of like it did tonight. So happy to be here with both of you guys again.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember back when you and I talked the first time when I was on your show, you mentioned to me how much you admired Will and you loved his show and all of that. And then just coincidentally, I ended up going on Will's show. So it's so cool to see that you guys are having a partnership.
Yeah, it worked out.
It is great. And I want to throw in my 2 cents here. And it's people don't understand like how difficult it is to do this, number one, but number two, to actually collaborate with other fans, whether it's from the same team or other teams. It is really difficult to do. So I'm extremely excited to be here with you now on your show, Sal, because not a lot of people do this and do it with grace. So I'm glad to be here and I appreciate you having us on.
Of course. Well, I owe a lot to Dave and Tyler here for helping me out with everything, but I appreciate that so much. Looks like we have some Lions fans in the chat, so I'm excited about that for us to maybe, for us to get into things and maybe talk a little smack. I don't like talking a lot of smack to Lions. Well, I don't like talking a lot of smack in general because as Vikings fans, we've been through a lot, as I know you guys can relate to. But I just have so much respect for the Lions fan base, for all of the loyalty and everything that you guys have put up with through some of the most abysmal seasons. So I don't like to get too dirty with the Lions fans, to be
Yeah,
honest.
we've been through a little bit, and I invited a few people. I invited everybody to come in tonight if they could make it. We've got such a great community in the Lions, nation, just like you guys do in your SKOL Nation or whatever you call it.
Mhm.
Just a great group of people. I've met so many Minnesota Vikings fans over the years, and it's just like being at home. Whenever I've traveled abroad, my sister lives in Minnesota. She's defected to be a Packer fan, so she's no longer a part of the family. But just a great
The
group of people.
worst.
Really, really appreciate what everybody does.
The worst. Well, at least we can unite in talking shit about the Packers, right? We've always got that in common. And actually, I want to bring this up because I just saw in the chat that Bulldog said, I'm smoking a bowl and drinking green tea. It tastes just like Packers
Oh
tears.
my God.
He's living right, sounds like.
And
Having a
I
good
mean,
night.
nothing tastes better than that. So, yeah, it looks like a lot of people are getting down in the chat. Gummies being ate, drinks being had. So I'm glad everyone's letting loose before this big matchup. But I want to start out with talking about what these teams have in common. Obviously, I said they've been through a lot historically, but what comes to mind when I think about the last couple years for the Lions and also the Vikings this year is the quarterback situation. Both have wound up with quarterbacks that their previous teams have deemed busts. Jared Goff was a number 1 overall pick, was in LA, had more success than Sam Darnold did up until now, who was a 3rd overall pick and has currently, now that he has 14 wins with the Vikings, more wins than he ever had with the Jets, which was only 13, which is crazy to think about. But Riley, why don't you tell me a little bit about, I know. Let's take the Matt Stafford situation out of it because I know that's obviously complicated how emotional it was to move on from him. But what were your thoughts on Goff before he got to the Lions, and how did you feel about them acquiring him?
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak on this. Will and I spoke a night. We've spoken on it a number of times on his show. He was one of the few people that I know that were on board with Goff right away. I was
Mhm.
not, and I think it was, I wasn't. I couldn't sit here and say that I sat and watched LA Rams games and I knew what kind of player I'd seen Goff play when he was in college. I knew he had a good arm, but it was just such a case of, if McVay and the Rams are throwing him in this trade and giving multiple first rounders, that tells you how bad they wanted to get off of his contract. So
Right.
naturally, I just thought, man, because as a big Stafford fan, which I still am, all those years it was like, well, what could Stafford get you in a trade? And you'd hear differing opinions. He's not getting you a
Mhm.
first. He maybe gets you 2/3. Well, he turns out he got a couple of firsts and a starting caliber, and then turns out to be a way above starting caliber quarterback. So Jared Goff has earned my respect so much, as Sam Darnold has, I'm sure, for Vikings fans. Just the mental toughness these guys approach the game with. Jared Goff's a hell of a quarterback, and he's grown on me so much because, I thought he was going to be a bridge quarterback when he first arrived in Detroit, and I was proven wrong on that.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. Sam Darnold joining this team did not move the needle for me whatsoever. It's a little bit of a different situation because the Vikings didn't give up anything to get him. It was a 1-year thing. It's like we thought of this as a rebuilding season anyway. It was fine, but I certainly had almost no faith in him even getting past 6 wins. And here we are. And I think it's just so cool to be able to see both of them flourishing, having so much confidence, playing up to their potential, and just like gaining so much respect, like you guys have said. But Will, do you have anything to add to that? Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I've been a staunch supporter of Jared Goff. I mean, I've been pounding my chest for this guy ever since he came to Detroit, and I'm a little bit of an analytical nut, I guess, when it comes to stats and metrics and key performance indicators and all the things that a lot of people don't care about. When I first looked at Jared Goff and Matt Stafford's stats, what I saw was the same, identical. And I knew right then and there that the let off of play wasn't going to happen. Jared Goff commanded very proficient offenses in LA, but it was Sean McVay that threw this guy under the bus. And then by putting together this trade that made it look like Goff was trash. I mean, you're throwing in first round picks for Matthew Stafford to get out of Detroit and for Jared Goff to be sent to Detroit. On the surface, everybody looked at it like there's no way Jared Goff's going to do anything in Detroit. But he comes into a team decimated. 85% of that team was changed over the first season. So he had no weapons to throw to. He had no weapons behind him or around him. Everybody got hurt, and he goes 3-13-1 in his first season and missed 3 games. But then they bounced back in 22, positive season, 9-8, and then history from there. I mean, from 23 forward, this team has just been cooking. What really made a lot of sense in this trade is what we got. I mean, they gave us way too much. And because of that trade, the Detroit Lions are now set up with Jamison Williams, Josh Paschal, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Broderick Martin, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. That's what we got in the Matthew Stafford trade. And by the way,
insane.
The best quarterback in the NFL right now today, or at least statistically this season, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL today. So I've been a big supporter. Big supporter of Sam Darnold, too. I'm probably one of the only ones that said, watch out for this guy. He's got a cannon for an arm. And if you give him some weapons that he has to throw to with Addison and Jefferson, he's going to hurt you. And he's been doing it all season. So good for Sam Darnold and the Vikings, man. I mean, what a great season you guys are having.
Yes, he sure does. His arm, it's unbelievable. And all right, I got to give some love to Dweeb here. Thank you so much for the super chat. But he says, Goff eats burritos from the middle first. And one of you guys are going to have to explain to me what that means, because I've never heard that before.
I don't know if it's true. There's rumors. But Riley, do you know anything about it?
I don't. I just love that there's people. I see Jay in here and a bunch of familiar names from Will's show. But I just love that people are here hanging out. And dude gives us a couple bucks to, maybe ask him to elaborate, because I don't know what it means. But I love that they're here hanging out with us.
Yeah, is that just a saying for like badasses in general, that they just eat their burrito from the middle, or is that specific to Goff? I gotta know more about that, because that's hardcore if that's the case. And I think that was a big thing that everyone thought. McVay is looked to be this mastermind, so smart with offenses, and then for him to toss aside Goff like this, you've got to think, well, he must think that either he's not. It's not possible for him to be a Matt Stafford, obviously, and then to give all of that up on top of that. And so I think it's very interesting that he's looked at this way as knowing so much about offenses. And then Kevin O'Connell takes, a cast off, and he turns Sam Darnold into this here. So it is interesting to see the similarities there between these two quarterbacks. And hopefully Darnold will continue to have success that mirrors what Goff has been able to have with his new team. All right. Another similarity here that I've noticed, especially this season, is the head coaches of both the Vikings and the Lions are both now known for their very, very emotional post-game press conferences, or not conferences, locker room speeches. I think that everyone would agree Campbell takes it to a little bit of a higher level than KOC does as far as the emotions go. And I thought it was interesting how last week a lot of our divisional foes were kind of making fun of the situation with Sam Darnold, being drenched in the water bottles and being carried around the locker room and all of that, because it was just a regular season win. So they thought it was kind of funny. But then we have Darren Campbell on Monday night, literally in tears. So, Riley, what are your thoughts? Do you like seeing this level of emotion from Dan Campbell? Sorry, I just realized I said his name wrong. It's been a long day, you guys. What did I say, Darren? Dan
right
Campbell.
There with you.
Do you like seeing this level of emotion from him? And what do you think? How do you think the team responds to something like that?
Yeah, first of all, you're fine. That's why we're teaming this together. We're all pitching in and helping each other out. And I do, and I know we had kind of talked about this before when we were playing back in week 7. I do because it's authentic, and I do because it's genuine. And I saw even the same old thing with Kevin O'Connell. Anybody making fun of that, it's just funny because it's like that's a position that you want to be in. I think that Dan Campbell, his emotion is very real, and I think that's his strength. I think that's what players, every player he had, has stated that they would, like the whole cliche of run through a wall for the guy. Dan Campbell is a master motivator, and I kind of feel like Kevin O'Connell is as well. So beyond just being able to motivate people, they game plan smart. They make adjustments in game very smart. I honestly feel like this game on Sunday not only is to decide who the NFC North champion is, who gets a number 1 seed, who gets a bye for the first round of the playoffs. I also feel whoever wins this game, that coach should be named the NFL Coach of the Year.
Good point. It's hard to disagree with that. Will, how do you react to the tears and all of that? Because I know, like Riley said, he believes it's genuine. I also believe that it's genuine. I don't agree with the people who make fun of him or who say that it's fake, because I don't know about you guys, but I certainly can't cry on a whim like that and fake that and squeeze out those tears. And I would assume it's even harder for a grown man to do it. But I like seeing the vulnerability. I think it sends such a good message just to men in general that it's okay to tell each other that you love each other and to, be transparent about your emotions and tell guys that you're proud of them. I mean, I was just saying on Twitter, I wish a man would tell me that he's proud of me once in my life. I mean, it's my daddy issues just on flaring up this week. But
I was going to tell you
what
that
do
at
you
the end.
what do you think, Will, about how emotional Dan Campbell gets?
So it's the same thing. And the words that Riley used, I mean, authentic. I mean, I don't know if there's a better word to describe it, but Dan Campbell is probably one of the most authentic coaches you're going to find. I don't watch KOC enough to know what he's really like, but to speak on Dan Campbell, he is going to tell you the way that it is. He's not going to sugarcoat anything. He stands up at the press conferences. He doesn't pull any punches. He's not giving everything away, but he's also not hiding anything either. I think that he's one of those master motivators, like Riley said, but he's like the Tony Robbins of NFL football coaches. He really knows how to get his guys in line and get them ready. And at the end of the day, he's not gonna BS them. He's gonna tell them what they need to do and what they have to do, and they have to show up. And the way that we know that it works, not only are they winning, but these guys are playing snap to whistle week in and week out. They're not taking plays off. But guys like Teddy B that just came back to this team that really praised Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn and everybody else in that locker room and said that it is so great to be around these guys that are smiling, they're happy, they're together, they're playing ping pong, they're playing cards, they're doing whatever in the locker room. They're not trying to go home. They're hanging out after practice, before practice. That is what a motivator will do for you. He brings everybody together. And that is why this team is able to, like Riley said, run through a brick wall for the guy and continue to win. So big ups to Dan Campbell. And as far as the tears, I agree with you. There's nothing wrong with showing your vulnerability and being emotional at times, because it's real, because it is authentic. Yeah. If it wasn't, I think we would be able to tell right away. But Dan Campbell is he's a very emotional dude, and you see it. Post game, during some of his post-game press conferences, he's shed some tears. In the locker room, he shed some tears. On the field, he shed some tears. And he should be damn happy of what they've been able to produce this season.
Absolutely.
Has he done it? I haven't seen. I know he's kind of emotional, and I have all the respect in the world for him, but has he ever gotten teary-eyed and emotional?
Not that I can remember, but he's been doing these post-game locker room speeches where he's fired up, he's amped up, he's walking back and forth, he's handing out multiple game balls to guys, he's calling out guys who maybe you wouldn't think of when you reflect on the game as making the biggest contribution, but he's always keeping track of the guys' stats and what is a record-setting game for them as individuals. And you can just tell this locker room is different from ones we've seen in years past. It's obviously been a much different tune since he took over for Mike Zimmer. But I think this is the year that his culture change is really taking the full effect, and you can see it on this level. And I don't know if you guys saw, because they played it on repeat like a million times on SportsCenter over like 48 hours, but what he does for Sam Darnold and how much I know he motivates him, and recognizing like, hey, you're the first quarterback to ever win 14 games in your first year with a franchise, and celebrating that to the level that he did, and all of the players rallying around him. I know a lot of the commentators were saying on Monday that this is a big deal, because rarely does an entire locker room, offense, defense, rally around a guy to the extent that they did for Sam Darnold on Sunday night. And so it's just so cool to see. And I know it's very similar to what's been going on with the Lions the last few years. So yeah, I love it. I think these teams have a lot more in common than people really realize as
I
far as
agree.
that goes.
Yeah.
But the chat is popping off, you guys. I really appreciate it. We've got 86 people here right now. It's so nice to see so many people. And a lot of good points are being brought up in the chat. I promise you, we are going to get to talking about Kirby and the smack talk that rookie cornerbacks are letting out against Justin Jefferson this week. But we don't want to get too controversial this early. We don't. We're gonna keep it cool for now. So I promise you guys, we will get to all of that. If you could like and subscribe to Vikings First and Skol, I would so appreciate it. And again, I've got my two pals here from Rocked on Lions, so make sure you check out their channel as well. All right, what should we move on to? What should we move on to? Like I said, we got to keep it chill here. Well, okay, let's move on to some differences. The Lions are depleted. They have a ton of injuries, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I know you guys acquired former Vikings Zadarius Smith earlier in the year to take place of Hockenson. He's been obviously a little bit more. He's been more rotational than Aiden Hutchinson would be, obviously. But despite all of those injuries, they're still winning games. And then the Vikings are going to this matchup pretty healthy, especially for being week 18. They've got the one injury being Patrick Jones out as a linebacker, but otherwise they're looking really good as far as that goes. Will, what effect do you think that all of these defensive injuries have had? And is that something you're concerned about going into this week?
So if you do watch my show from time to time, right? If anyone that's in here, they know what I say week in and week out, that I have not been concerned. When Hutch went down, I was not concerned. Yeah, I haven't been concerned about. Yeah, I haven't been concerned about any of the injuries. That's right. We were talking week 7. I said I wasn't concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little concerned now because of the fact that we've lost so many defensive players, all defensive players, and only one offensive player. And I don't want to lose any more offensive players, but it's no secret that the Detroit Lions defense has been battered and bruised since week 6. In the entire season, I mean, we've seen guys go down week after week after week. 6 defensive starters have landed on injured reserve since the beginning of the season. At one point, we had over 23 guys that have walked through IR, and since training camp, 30 guys have gone through IR and been released with, injury settlements. So, losing Aiden Hutchinson was huge, but just seeing how Dan Campbell and AG had built this defense and what they were trying to do, I wasn't worried about it. We still had our interior pass rush. We still had the guys in the backfield or in the secondary, and then Carlton goes down. And it's like, what's next? And then we lose Lee McNeil. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. So this is going to be a rough situation where we're going in against a very high pass offense that can push the ball down the field. I mean, Sam Darnold's really pushing the ball down, quite a bit. I think more than anybody in the league, honestly. But the good news is we've got Alex Anzalone back. Okay, so this is our big leader in the middle of the defense who clearly has been missing. Without him in the game, you could see that, Jack's doing a great job, but you can tell that we're just missing that captain, that guy that can lead the ship, that can direct the ship. When we got a bunch of guys down, that he can step up. He's going to be in a situation where he's going to have to play with his hair on fire because he's going to try to take over the game and make up for multiple positions that have been lost. But he was a full participant today in practice, so there is a possibility that he's in the game this weekend. It's a very slim to none possibility, but at least it's a glimmer of hope for this defense that needs an injection right now. Everybody that we brought in, we pretty much let go over the last 8 days. So it's back to getting some guys back right now, which there's very few. So
yeah, I want to ask you about that, but first let me give a shout out to Casey for the super chat. So appreciate you. He says that the Pro Bowl snubbed Kirby, and like I said, we'll be talking about him more later. But just quickly, Riley, do you agree that he was snubbed?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. He had 2 picks last week.
Yeah, you lead the league in interceptions. I know it's a sensitive subject.
Yes.
He was snubbed, yes. Do we want to go into it now, or we're going to come back to it?
Well, whatever. We already brought it up, so I guess, yeah, let's get into it.
It's the clip of Matthew Stafford running up to him in the playoff game and saying, "You're dirty, it's on tape, I've seen it." That little thing goes viral, and then it's like a snowman. It builds, and then a player gets a reputation. I can say confidently, I mean, it's football. Things happen. Kirby Joseph's game plan is not to just go try to take a guy out for the season. It's not his agenda. It's not his motive. It's things like that circulate, and then people that, because even for me, like I mean, I'm a diehard NFL fan. I can't closely watch every team, and if I saw a clip of Baker Mayfield or Tua saying to somebody else that player's dirty, and you see it circulate, then you just kind of latch onto it, and it just becomes a thing. Is he a dirty player? I don't think he is. Has he hit some people hard that's caused some injuries and been some unfortunate things? Absolutely. But I don't think he's a dirty player. I just don't. And I would say that
I think
if
that
you were a Viking, like if he were to get traded to the Minnesota Vikings, what would you Vikings fans do? Would you just like say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore? You know what I mean? Like if he's on your team, it's fine. If he's on the other team, it's an easy target. It's like a villain in a Batman movie. You know, Batman's got to have Bane, he's got to have the Joker, he's got to have some kind of thing. And I just think, like, I get it, but I don't think that Kirby Joseph is like some malicious, just like, you know, I'm going to carve out a career by just taking people out and shortening theirs.
Yeah, you and I have talked about a couple of times now, like fan biases and how it dictates, you know, what everybody thinks. And you're kind of in an echo chamber on Twitter. And so, yeah, absolutely. I can see how that happens. I think specifically with this fan base, they still have fresh in their mind what happened with TJ Hockenson the last time, well, in last season in week 16, when these guys faced off and he tore his ACL and his MCL. So, they definitely feel it deep in their veins that he's a dirty player for sure. But Will, what do you think about that?
All right, so this might be a little bit long-winded, and I apologize. So
take it away.
Look, Kirby, he's not dirty, and here's why. So we see low tackles on players that have a very large size difference in the NFL all the time. Unfortunately, the NFL has made it incredibly difficult for this secondary, especially to tackle receivers coming over the middle. And then you got these big guys streaking down the field, and you can't hit them too high. Like what just happened against the 49ers. Sam Laporta got drilled in the face and in the helmet multiple times, and so did other players for the Detroit Lions. No flags, by the way. No penalties called. But anyway, I've got to feel confident, or Kirby has to feel confident, at least, in tackling somewhere. And if you go and slow down and look at what happened to TJ Hockenson, he put his shoulder pad on his thigh. It's not his fault that TJ's foot got stuck in the turf. The cleat got stuck. That is one of the worst injuries that happens to these players, and it just so happens to look really bad, especially when the way, Kirby finishes through the tackle. It's just, the way the body's going. It just looks worse than what it is. Slow motion makes everything look 1,000 times worse. So TJ Hockenson opened up about this, though, finally. And this is what he had to say. So I came across this the other day because I kept seeing all this Kirby stuff. And here's what he said. He said, he was a teammate of Kirby's, by the way, back in 22. So since then, he doesn't believe Joseph was intentionally trying to hurt him. And here's his quote. He says, "I know Kirby pretty well. I've played with him. I don't necessarily think it was intended to injure." This was back in April. He said this. He said, "You go back on the tape and you see what happened. I don't think it was intentional. I just want to make sure it wasn't. And that's why I'm using my voice here. Players protect players. That's in any facet of the league. You don't want a defensive guy headhunting or knee hunting, and the same thing for an offensive guy." So Hockenson came out and backed him up. And at that point, you would think that it would be dropped, but it's not. People are still calling, Kirby out, and now it's taking him off a Pro Bowl ballot as the, number one safety in the league. It doesn't make any sense.
I got to be honest with you. This is the first time that I've heard that quote from TJ. So I totally get what you're saying with that then, because why wouldn't, if TJ, you would think either wouldn't comment on it at all, or he would say what he really thought. So that's really interesting. And I don't think that guy, unless I completely missed it, which maybe it did, it was April, so maybe it didn't, but I don't remember hearing that whatsoever. But yes, the chat is certainly popping off now talking about Kirby. And you guys, we've got over 100 people here tonight. So that is so awesome. I'm so happy you guys could join us. But yeah, it is
I dropped the link
interesting.
in the chat for you, Sal. I dropped the link in the chat for you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, yeah. You guys check out that link and see what you think what you think about TJ's comments for sure. I think also with Vikings fans, we Dan Campbell, I don't know if you remember the sign last year. I know we've talked about it, Riley, with the kneecap sign that a fan had, which I don't know. I think I'm in the minority where I don't think that fans are literally thinking about that sort of thing when they're making a sign for the NFC Championship game for the first time ever in their life. But whatever, that's another thing. But I think with Dan Campbell being a member of the 2009 Saints team that beat the Vikings in the NFC Championship, and then it comes out later that Bounty Gate was a whole situation where players were being rewarded for injuring team players of the opposite team. I have definitely seen people think that Dan Campbell subscribed to that then and still subscribes to it now. I would assume, Riley, that you do not agree with that take.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I mean, there's violent hits that happen, and it feels like it's kind of the low hanging fruit. Like I see people commenting, like, well, what does Tyler Higbee think? I think that for a player like TJ Hockenson, the thing to remember too is a lot of these guys know each other from college. They've been friends, even before they became teammates or opponents against one another in the NFL. If you were in TJ's position and you're going to release that comment, why are you releasing that comment? You're doing it because you're saying, all right, I'm seeing how much flack he's taking. And if it's like, well, what does Tyler Higbee think of Kirby Joseph? I don't know. I haven't heard anything that Tyler Higbee has said, probably because he understands it's football and things happen. Again, I think it was just, Stafford's comment in the heat of the moment. And then that gets perpetuated today. I think Kirby posted something about, blaming not getting nominated to the Pro Bowl or whatever due to Stafford's comments. But I think that Will bringing that up's very on point because, again, it's TJ Hockenson going out of his way to say, like, it's guys, that's not what he was trying to do. But again, I understand it. People want to have kind of things to hold on to and hang on to. I don't think that Dan Campbell's going about his objective of trying to win the division and eventually a Super Bowl by doing anything maliciously. I think he coaches the guys that he has to the absolute bone. I think he does everything in his power to try to lead that team. And make no mistake, I thought that the Vikings were going to be fourth going into this season. I thought they were going to place fourth in the division. They've been like the team that just will not go away. I've got so much respect for the Minnesota Vikings. And I feel like this game on Sunday is going to be the most difficult regular season game the Lions will have ever played. But I just think that, I'm not faulting anybody that is convinced in their soul that Joseph's a dirty player, but I'm telling you, I don't think that that's really the case.
Yeah, I think that
trying to do a bounty gate kind of thing.
Right. I think that to show the positivity and the emotion and all of that in the locker room, and then on the flip side to say that Dan Campbell is encouraging guys to ruin other teams' careers and et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think it tracks. I don't see that from Dan Campbell. Will, I'm assuming you would agree with that.
Let me unmute myself. So yeah, I do agree.
Oh, sure.
I absolutely do agree with Riley that this is not something that TJ Hawkins is just going to put out there to put out there. He's going to catch a lot of flack, for putting out a statement like that if it were untrue. But right. You mentioned the Bounty Gate thing. So here's the funny thing about Dan Campbell. He was a tight ends coach for the Saints.
Yes. I know.
Not on the defense. So he had nothing to do with the defense. Now, you would think that they're in the same locker room and they all know what's going on, but they're in their own individual meeting rooms. It's not like the tight ends were out there trying to whack guys over the head. It was a defensive thing. So I think that has to be clear. And there's one other thing that's tracking here that I never thought about. It's probably ingrained in people's minds now. When Dan Campbell steps up to the podium and says, we're going to bite a kneecap off and, we're going to come up and bite another kneecap off. And now kneecaps are getting taken out because of Kirby Joseph. I mean, I get it. People are putting 2 and 2 together. It just doesn't add up to 4. It's
Yeah.
just part
I
of
think
our
it's a
culture. It's just
coincidence.
part of our identity, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a coincidence for sure, but I know a lot of people disagree with me. Dweeb, thank you so much for the super chat. He says Dan Campbell heard saying Darnold is better than Goff. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it. I think they're both great. I mean, they're both having career seasons. I don't know. It's hard to say which is better than the other one. Obviously, Goff is putting up a lot more points. Got the highest scoring offense. I think has it been over 40 points 6 times, and then 2 times that it's been over 50 points, which is, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little scared about all of that. On the flip side, we've got the Vikings have scored over 40 once. So I think we know that this is going to come down to, I think anyway, that the factor is going to be Brian Flores' defense versus Ben Johnson's offense, and who's going to win that battle at the end of the day. I think obviously you know how every game has went with the Lions. Pretty much for the most part, they're all shootouts. So I think it's going to come down to that: the Vikings defense versus the Lions offense. Will, what do you think?
I'm right there with you. So from the very beginning of this season, I did a series prior to the regular season starting called Unbiased Reviews. And I was trying to put my unbiased review of the defense for all of the NFC North teams, the offense, every positional group. And I said from the jump that the Vikings were going to have the best linebacker group in the NFC North. And they do. And it is a very, very difficult defense. It is a very weird defense that they run. But the Lions have done really well against it. And the thing that Jared Goff does really well is he works incredibly quick against pressure. He's one of the best quarterbacks against pressure. And if I were to give you a couple of stats, to probably think about this weekend, and let's see if it comes to fruition as soon as I can pull it up here.
Hey, while he's pulling that up, can we make sure we get a good view of the hoodie, Sally?
Yes, you guys. I got this today. We got
What does everyone
mossed.
think? Yeah.
About this is the one, fight against cancer. So I got it today, and I've got actually a little bit of a funny story about this hoodie if you guys want to hear it really quick. So I bought this when they came out. I don't know, I would say maybe a month or so ago. Moss announced that he was doing this to raise money, and he did a whole like Instagram live announcing it. And this was after it kind of already got leaked that he had cancer. He didn't get a chance to announce it himself, which I think is disappointing. But so I ordered them, and it was weird because the t-shirts and the hoodies were the exact same price. They were both $40. Well, obviously I'm just gonna get the hoodie, right? So I got two, and I'm looking at my PayPal account the other day, and I've got $80, and it's to something called like, oh, I don't have it pulled up right now, but like basically it was like adult media services or something, and then the logo is like a adult video buy and trade marketplace for
Oh no.
$80. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I didn't I didn't sign up for $80 of buying and trading adult videos. What the hell? So I did some digging, and I realized that it was the Randy Moss hoodies. So I'm not sure what the story is there. I've asked the internet. I've did a search to see if anyone else is talking about it. But really interesting. I don't know what's going on over there in Randy Moss's camp, but got some side businesses. I looked up the website. It really is the number one seller of buying and trading adult videos. Which, who knew in 2024 that was still something that people needed. But
Wow. So is he used? They're
yeah,
probably using a PayPal that is linked to that business.
right.
Yeah. Yep.
Which, what's the story there? I don't know, but
I mean, to each his own. If you need to have a business to make money, whatever it is, it is. If people are going to
yeah.
buy it, they're going to buy it.
Oh, no
Jeez.
judgment for me there, but I've just like Randy or whoever's running the show. I don't think Randy's running the LLC and shipping out the merch, but whoever is, like, they probably should have filed for a separate LLC, just for tax purposes, if nothing else. But
Right. Yeah, that could have some
anyway,
severe drawback on poor Randy.
yes. So did you got your stats? I'm assuming.
I do. So Jared Goff is one of the best against the blitz, as we know, and the Vikings are one of the teams that love to blitz. So the Vikings in Week 7 blitzed Jared Goff on 55.2% of his dropbacks, which is the
Wow.
highest blitz rate that he had faced that season, or so far this season. Now, Goff targeted Amon-Ra St. Brown on half of his routes that were run, 7 of 14, against the blitz, and he completed all 7 passes for 105 yards and a touchdown. Goff has recorded the 5th highest completion percentage of 69.9% and averaged the 5th most yards per attempt against the blitz. So, look, you got a great defense. It's just we know what you're going to do. Like, we know you're going to blitz. Yeah. The question is Ben Johnson going to have this offense ready to go, quick strikes right out the get, because you guys like to blitz right off the jump. And then it kind of slows down. In the second half, it doesn't happen as much until the game gets really close in the fourth quarter and you guys start pouring it on again. And by then, we're hoping that Jahmyr Gibbs has found his way and he's just going to beat you to the outside. So I think that's the game plan too. I mean, it is your defense versus our offense. It's literally going to be whatever defense can get a couple of stops in this game, because I have a feeling that our defense is going to allow a few points in this game too. So
yeah, I agree. It's like, I don't want to be so cliche, but I think it's going to come down to a couple of stops, a couple of punts. Hopefully, we'll see what kind of mood Dan Campbell's in, and turnovers. Which I hate to be that cliche about it, but I think these teams are so evenly matched, and we saw how it went down the first time that they squared off. You know, both teams had almost 400 yards, and it came down to 2 points. So
it came down to a field goal with like 15 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It was the most stressful. Well, I guess we've had a couple of stressful Vikings games here.
The other loss for the Rams, I'll never forget it. It was the one in SoFi. Wasn't there a blatant face mask call that was missed? It's crazy to think that the Vikings and the Lions are both like this close to being like 6-0. Well, the Bills took it to the Lions, but the Tampa loss for Lions, it was a very close game. I mean, and I'm thinking, I was going through that today mentally, and I'm like, man, the Vikings, not only they're 14-2, but they're that close to being 16-0.
It is crazy. And those 2 losses, you know, they had that tough loss against the Lions, and then they had a short week. It was a Thursday night against the Rams. Right. And it certainly wasn't a good performance from them, but they had the ball with a chance, you know, to come back and get the game there at the end of the fourth quarter. And blatant missed face mask penalty on Sam Darnold, one of the worst that I've seen that wasn't called. And I know that Matt Stafford had one maybe a month or so ago that was also really bad. But so do we know if he would have executed the comeback and been able to pull off the win? No, we don't. But I do feel they were kind of robbed of that. But it was 2 losses in a week, and since then they haven't lost. So it's really crazy to think that both of these teams, same division, 14-2. I don't think you can make it up. You can't make it up.
You can't. So that Rams loss was Thursday after the Lions played the Vikings on Sunday. So that's crazy. That was like if you knew at the start of the year that 4-day stretch was going to be the worst of it for you guys, at least, you know, through the regular season. I don't know. It's just crazy to look back and think like, how did we get here? Because I did not expect the Vikings to be, you know, as good as they are. But
I don't think anybody did.
Let me throw this out there. So there's a couple of things, right? I mean, number one, you know, we're looking at this from the perspective that this could be the first time where we have a 5th seed as a 14-2 team. I don't think that's a secret. We've talked about that. Mm-hmm. But why are the Vikings here? Like, why? Yes. That's a good question. Like, why are they here? Because nobody expected it. When you look at strength of schedule, they have the 30th ranked strength of schedule this season. That was updated as of December 23rd. So that's not good. Like, they're in the bottom end of the pool going up against the easier teams this season. The hardest team they're going to face is the Lions. Now, the team that you know, they gave a lot of trouble to was the Lions too in Week 7. So I think that this is going to be a fairly evenly matched game again. The Lions obviously are hurting big time on the defense, but let's talk about, I mean, when you're ready, let's talk about what's going to happen, you know, being a 5th seed, or what really could happen to the team that is a 5th seed. You know, what does that really mean? When you're ready, you tell me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think let's get into a second because the other thing that I definitely want to hit on and I didn't realize that they updated the strengths of schedule that drastically because going into the season they were rated as having a pretty challenging
16th.
schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
and so I didn't
were up there.
realize. I didn't realize that it fell that much, but that's interesting. I wanted to talk about, though, something else that's unique to these teams is that we all know how often Dan Campbell likes to go for it on fourth down. He's known for that at this point. It's his reputation. But the Vikings have been really good against fourth down this year. They're best in the league. I think that is it 35% of the time that they have stopped fourth down conversions. I feel like I know the answer to this, Riley, but do you think that that is going to perhaps change Dan Campbell's philosophy on going for it in this game on fourth down?
I do not, because I don't think that Dan Campbell will at this point decide, okay, I'm going to let somebody else dictate what I do. But that does bring a question to me because for you watching every snap of the Vikings, how often have other teams gone for it? So like when you say they shut people out 35% of the time, how often are other teams going for it on fourth down against Minnesota?
I believe it is the most in the league that they have had teams go against them on fourth down. At least that's what I heard on K-Fan today. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what I heard on there.
I would buy that because, and I know when I was doing the Will show with him the other day, we were kind of talking about that where it seems like more and more teams now are going for it on fourth down. If you're like 4th and 5 and under, just go for it. There's times, and it even happened Monday night against San Francisco. The Lions went for it. Goff threw it a second late to Sam Laporta, and we didn't get the points. I was so frustrated until San Francisco went. They missed a field goal. Then it was halftime. We got the ball, went, scored, and everything worked out. But to answer your question shortly, I don't think that Dan Campbell's going to change it. I think that they're just going to be damn sure that they've got like plays that they know or are very confident that this is going to work. I suspect that they're plays that we haven't seen yet. This is where Ben Johnson makes his money. This is where Dan Campbell makes his money. This is where all the guys make their money. They're certainly going to respect Minnesota's defense. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think that they're going to shiver away and say, man, these guys are really good. Let's just play it super safe here. I don't think that now it's not the time or the place to do that.
I can't see that happening either. Will, what do you think?
So I think where Riley was going with this is Dan has an identity built on this team, and that identity is not going to change. Dan said the same thing last year when he lost the NFC Championship. There was a plethora of things that went on in that game, but one of the things is going for it on fourth down and not taking points early and then completely deflated in the second half, and you let your defense, lose the game. This season, he said the same thing that he said last year. We have an identity. I'm not going to change who I am and who this team is this game. Why wouldn't I have done it all of the previous games? This team believes in Dan Campbell. They believe in what he's going to do. They're all on board. Dan is telling them all week long, look, when we get into a fourth down situation, this is what we're doing. So they already know what's going on before the game is here on Sunday night. They know that Dan's going for it or he's not. Yeah. I will be a little upset if it's, 4th and 5 and we're at the 35 again on, in our zone and Dan goes for it. That will make me upset because I think that is careless. I do. That is the one play that we've done a few times in the last couple of years that we don't get that is careless. So that bothers me. But Dan's not going to stop. He's not going to stop. Matter of fact, you look at the league now. No. The league is following suit.
Yep. Yeah.
Every team is doing it now.
If he didn't change the philosophy or tone it down after the NFC Championship game, he certainly isn't going to be evolving it for this game at all. But Dweeb, thank you again for another super chat. He says, Goff throws 3 interceptions and benches himself. Well, I certainly don't think that that's even a possibility, even if he threw 5. But Will, you brought this up earlier, Teddy Bridgewater, which I meant to reply to that then. Former Viking, drafted him. We loved him. At least I certainly loved him. Absolutely devastating to see the injury. He bounces around a bit. He goes to Detroit, and then he ultimately decides to retire after last season. Steps away, wins a state championship coaching his high school alma mater, and then about, gosh, I don't know. It seems like it was just yesterday, but 3 weeks ago or so, I feel like he says in an interview that he's interested in coming back. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. That's not happening. Like,
I said the same thing.
okay. At this point in the season, that's not happening. But really cool to see that. I know some Vikings fans were a little bummed because of obviously the stakes here to see Teddy go. But I remember when Teddy announced his retirement last year, he had an Instagram post that was him and Dan Campbell walking through the tunnel together for the last time. And that really stuck out to me, how Dan Campbell even has, Teddy loves Dan Campbell, obviously. That's why he wanted to be back here. That's why he made his Instagram post, those two walking down the tunnel. But what is his status? Is he going to be activated this game, and will he be the backup to Goff already, or what's
So
going on
I
there?
haven't heard if he's going to be the backup right away, but what we have established is the Lions are going to be utilizing the emergency quarterback rule. So when you
Okay.
have the emergency quarterback rule, they are able to keep an extra guy on the roster so that 54th position doesn't really count, right?
Mhm.
That's what we're hearing. So expect to see 3 guys up for the rest of the season is what I'm understanding. I won't know anything just like you until really tomorrow, late afternoon, 4 p.m. when we see the final injury report, and then 90 minutes before the game, who's up, who's down. Teddy is not expected to really play, though. Even if this is a
of course.
blowout game, it's probably going to be Hendon Hooker getting some snaps right now. It's
Mhm.
not going to be Teddy B. I don't think that you would want to throw Teddy B in there just because.
Right.
I don't want to see him in there, to be honest with you. I don't think there's a need for it.
No,
But to kind of comment
I
on like this
agree.
whole thing, though, like it just, again, it feeds what Dan has done throughout his career
Mm.
since he was a player and since he was a young coach with New Orleans. He is in Miami. He's just infected guys the right way, so much so that he's built these relationships with guys like Teddy B that are now coming back
Mhm.
to this roster. And honestly, it's more of a coaching position, I think, for Teddy B. Like, he's a very cerebral coach. Clearly, just won a championship in his first year as a high school coach. Very cerebral guy.
Yes.
So he's going to be able to help Goff and help the passing game, and elevate this team just by being on the sideline. So there's really no reason for
Mhm.
him to be in the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. You guys, there is so much smack talking going on in the chat, and I love it. It's so funny. We've got almost 120 people in here right now, which is so cool. We are, I think, like nearing like an hour, but are you guys cool to keep going? Because everyone's having so much fun.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
enjoying
I'm
this.
good.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
good.
Okay. If not, we can totally end it. But it seems like we've got a bunch of people here. So yeah, let's just keep chatting about it. But I want to something else that's unique to Dan Campbell, and I didn't mean for this whole show to be about Dan Campbell, but that's just kind of where we're at. Is that he doesn't believe? We know he doesn't believe in resting starters, and because of that, he didn't rest anybody on Monday night, which ended up being a game that didn't really have any, it's not going to have any impact on the playoff seeding or going forward. And he still had everybody playing. And I think that's even more controversial than it would have been because it's a short week. So they're already going to have a day less than the Vikings are going to have. Plus they played a primetime game. Plus they were on the West Coast. So there's all of those factors going into it. Riley, do you and of course nobody was injured, right? So that, if somebody major was injured, it'd be a whole other conversation that I'm sure people would
Mhm.
be having. But does that bother you that he continued to play the starters in that Monday night game? And do you think it'll make a difference
No,
going
it
forward?
didn't bother me. Um, and what I will say is was actually really nice to hear was after the game, he was asked in the press conference if he really did give consideration to resting some of the guys, because at that point we now know that Minnesota won, and so it rendered that game at San Francisco meaningless insofar as the result. But it's tough because he had stated at the start of the week, we're taking everything, we're bringing everyone to the West Coast, like we're preparing a certain way, and then it becomes something where you don't want to flip it last minute and then say, okay, I'm going to take out Frank Ragnow and Jared Goff, and I'm going to put in Kobe Sorsdahl and then Hendon Hooker. Good luck, you got Joey Bosa or Nick Bosa coming at you. Like
Right.
there's certain things that you can't do. There's not that many players that you can rest. No matter what, you're playing a bunch of your starters. What I did expect, and Will and I talked about this, did a live watch party for that game with him, which is so fun to do. But it was, if the Lions were to have been up in a position where they were up 31-7 in the third quarter, well, then I think you do see some of those backup players go in. But the game, the way it played out, as most of the times it does in the NFL, you rarely see dominating blowouts. You rarely see. But so in the past, like when we played and beat Jacksonville 52-6, I would have liked to see Sione Vake or Craig Reynolds get some carries earlier in that particular game. But as far as this game against San Francisco, I'll tell you what, I would have been gut punched had the Lions lost that game, and then going all of this week leading up to Sunday being like, we all know how it feels when your team loses. It sucks. It's a horrible feeling. And
yeah.
San Francisco brought it. They wanted to win that game. The Lions wanted to win the game. And so, Dan Campbell, like Will said, he stated what the identity is, and then you don't change it up on your guys. They got to know what to expect. You can't say one thing and do something different. You can adjust it accordingly, but the game, the way it played out, it never was a situation where, okay, the Lions got this in the bag. So he had to keep rolling with the hand.
Yeah. Will, do you put any stock in the whole Monday night, had a day less rest, and still choosing to play the starters, or do you think that's kind of just a moot point?
I think it's a moot point. I mean, Nick Wright is the one that, brings this up, right? And he talks about how Dan Campbell made the biggest mistake of the season playing all of his starters in what was a meaningless game. And I mean, is it really meaningless? I mean, can you really rest players? You can't. You can rest 6. That's it. You get 6 healthy scratches. And then beyond that, the guys that are in game, your 48, player game roster, how many can you really rest? You can't. There's not like the Lions have a ton of backups. I mean, my goodness, we're missing 16 players, at least on the defense. We don't have anybody to rest, at least on the defensive side of the football. And on the offensive side of the football, you might be able to put in, an offensive lineman or 2. You might be able to put in a backup running back. You might be able to pull Amon-Ra out of the game. You can finagle your offensive scheme a little bit to do things a little bit differently for, the rest of the fourth quarter or whatever. But you really just can't rest players. And you don't want to put players in a position to get injured anymore, because if you're putting guys in that aren't getting a lot of snaps, that aren't going through the game snaps that week, they're more likely to cause problems. And problems in the NFL turn into injuries. So Dan Campbell's doing it the right way. And again, it's the identity. 6 days, 5 days, 4 days rest. It doesn't matter. We're going to be ready.
Yeah, I can definitely see your point there with who are you going to put in? You're risking injuries to other guys. So I get it. We've got another super chat, and he says, last one, he's predicting Teddy 2 touchdowns, Goff 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And that certainly would make this extremely memorable matchup. That would take it to a whole other level if that became the case. So
can you imagine how weird it's going to be if we all just look at the box score Sunday night and realize, like, oh my gosh, like he nailed it spot on.
Yeah, exactly. Do we if that's the case, you definitely need to buy a couple lottery tickets and more. Head to Vegas, bet your life savings, because that will be an epic prediction.
Speaking of Vegas and betting, have either of you watched Chiefs-aholic yet?
No, you mentioned it on the show this morning when I was like fading in and out of it, but I have not.
You have to watch Chiefs-aholic. I never knew this existed. Let's just put it this way. It's about a Chiefs super fan. He wore the wolf suit.
Yes, I know about. Yeah, go ahead.
It involves let's just say a crime spree. And I'll leave it at that. You've got to watch it. I was hooked from the minute this thing started. What a great production.
It's on
Where
Prime
did you find it?
Video?
It's on Prime.
Okay.
Oh my God. I remember when that story came out a couple years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And just being enamored with that story back then. If anybody doesn't remember, it's like one of those Chiefs super fans who you said, he dresses up all the time. It's kind of like the Chiefs version of our VWO. And I've heard some rumors actually that a couple VWO members are also run a little bit of
Oh
an
no.
illicit scheme too. I haven't heard anything new about it in a couple of years, but wouldn't that be some shit? Yeah,
And
I
they sell
definitely
some
got to
Wow.
hoodies
check it
at
out.
Randy Moss's place.
No, completely separate, completely separate
Must
from that.
must be
Businesses.
online videos or something that they're selling. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, I've got to check that out because that's right up my alley for sure. Let's move on. Let's talk about the smack talking because that's making some waves today. That your rookie cornerback, Arnold, he's saying that he doesn't think this is a good matchup for Minnesota. He thinks that they're going to have no problem covering them. And I don't know, it could be some locker room material for the Vikings. Do you, Riley, admire that confidence, or would you prefer that a guy who's going to go be covering Justin Jefferson maybe just, can keep it quiet?
Yeah, the latter. I have not seen his direct quotes, so I shouldn't speak on them because I don't know exactly what they are, but just based off of what you said, yeah. Not with Justin Jefferson, not with Jordan Addison. Cornerbacks are usually very confident. I don't know that any certain thing he said is going to translate to the game on Sunday. I think the players on both sides are going to be plenty motivated. But yeah, anything that's not going to help. I mean, just if you feel confident, you can just feel it instead of say it, and then just show it on the field on Sunday. Because it's going to be a nightmare on Sunday trying to defend not just those two, but the entire offense. But yeah, those two guys in particular.
Yeah, it's like, did you learn nothing from Jair Alexander when he went off talking a bunch of crap about
It,
Justin Jefferson, and now he's too scared to even play against the guy?
yeah,
So,
I'm stating the obvious. I recognize that, but those guys are so good, and I love the Lions receivers too. This is going to be such a fun game. But yeah, I would prefer that we didn't add any or give him any free motivation.
yeah. Will, are you into the confidence level there, or similar to Riley?
Look, I love confidence. I mean, you have to have confidence. But the thing that I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at the stats from the first game because I want to see if Terry and
Oh,
Arnold
all right.
has anything to really kind of back this up, right? And I'm
Mhm,
having trouble here because you guys scored 29 points and you had 3 field goals, so that's 9,
mhm.
right? So the other 20 points had to come from touchdowns. Aaron Jones had a touchdown, Justin Jefferson had a touchdown. That's 14. Where did the other 6 points come from? I don't see it. Sam
Was it a
Darnold didn't
pick
have a TD.
six?
Jared
Was
Goff
it a
didn't
pick
throw any
six?
interceptions.
Oh, it was a fumble scoop score. Remember? I think
So it's a
Montgomery
defensive score.
fumbled it. It was kind of right in the fourth quarter, and Minnesota picked it up and scooped and scored, if I remember right.
Okay. All right. So I
Oh,
mean,
good
if
memory.
that's what it was, then it adds up and it makes sense. And Reichard must have missed an extra point or something. But
Yeah, I know
um,
he's missed a couple.
so here's where I'm at. Terry and Arnold actually can. I mean, he's talking the talk. He kind of walked the walk a little bit because Justin Jefferson had 81 yards. Jordan Addison had
Okay.
66. Jalen Naylor had 76. Those are good numbers for a Minnesota Vikings team that, I mean, they can push it downfield. This is a team that can put up, 100 plus yards apiece. Now, if they walk into this game and they let up more than what they did the first game, that's going to be a problem because this is going to be a game that can get out of control quick. And if you've seen what's been happening to the Lions defense, if we get our linebackers singled up with one of your tight ends or Jordan Addison or somebody leaking over the middle, we're in trouble. We're getting
Yeah.
killed by running backs and tight ends coming over the middle or leaking up the side, down the perimeter there. And that's just not a good place to be in, especially against a team like the Vikings that has a guy named TJ Hockenson that knows how to play in Ford Field. And man, does he want
Mhm.
revenge right now. So it's gonna be an interesting game. But they
You
backed it
yeah.
up the first game.
You completely read my mind because I was about to say we can't forget to talk about TJ. We know he was traded in 2022 to the Vikings, interdivision trade, which I never love when they do that, but it seems like it's worked out so far. And it's weird that it's only now his first return to Ford Field, but like we said, his first time facing off against the Lions since he hurt his knee. And What you're going to be at the game, Will, on Sunday. How do Lions fans feel about TJ Hockenson in general? How do you think he'll be received on Sunday night?
So I don't think anything's really going to go down for TJ. So kind of like what happened with Matthew Stafford. I mean, there was a whole lead up to all of this. Matthew Stafford coming back to Detroit,
Yeah.
for the first time, and we booed the hell out of him. Oh, excuse me there.
Did you?
We booed the heck out of him. Like the whole place did. I'm not saying I
Oh
did.
my
I'm saying we
God.
as Lions fans, he got booed out of that place. But you know what? Matthew Stafford eats that stuff up and he uses it. So for TJ, I just don't see where we're going to have an opportunity unless somehow he's noticed jogging on the field and fans start to boo. I don't see how it's going to happen.
No, it's been
I think
enough
TJ
time.
he was a fairly well-liked individual in Detroit. I don't think that, and so was Matthew Stafford, but this is a rivalry game. So it's all bets are off, right? I mean, it's no holds barred. It's a cage match. We're not letting you guys out of there without an L. So
Riley, how do you feel? Do you think this is going to be a big game for TJ? Do you see that in the cards for him? Revenge, do you buy into the revenge game narrative, or do you think enough time has passed now that both sides are just kind of like, whatever?
I expect TJ Hockenson to play well because he's a damn good football player, and I think he just wants to play well. I don't know that there's any type of, and if there is, you have to kind of fabricate it or come up with whatever you got to do to motivate you. But I don't think that there's any type of ill will from Lions fans. I remember I was at TJ Hawkinson's very first game as a pro. It was in Arizona, and he had like 147 yards. But yeah, I mean, after the trade, it was kind of revealed, or they let the scoop out that they didn't feel like TJ Hockenson was part of the culture that they were trying to build. Like he didn't necessarily love being a Detroit Lion. And
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. They said like it was clear, like his body language, he just wasn't all the way bought in by the time, near the end of his tenure in Detroit. And they lost a lot. So first thing he does when he gets to Minnesota is, I'm excited to actually look forward to winning games. And so there may be some Lions fans that take and hang on to that. But, I think you start having success. I think you kind of just let all that stuff kind of go. I think it's made the best man win. It's so funny because I remember when we did this back in week 7, I remember throwing out there like, hey, maybe this will all come down to the last week. And even when I said that, I didn't really think it would because
no, not like this.
Not at 14-2. Teams don't go 14-2 often, let alone two in the same conference, let alone 2 in the same division. And it's just shaped up this way. I think it's just going to be, I hope that there's, I just feel like it's, and of course the Vikings fans feel the same way, but the story for the Lions, I feel like you've come too far to just lose it here at the last little bit. But then I'd have to go into this whole thing about, well, you can still do it from the 5th seed, which I'm sure is a question that you also have lined up. If the team who loses Sunday, can they still go all the way? But yeah, I'm kind of.
I have the answer to that, by the way.
Let me throw this ball to Will. He's on like a 5-yard just open out route. I'm going to throw it to him and let him take and score a touchdown.
Yes, I want to hear what he says. First, I just want to say we've still got 120 people in here, you guys, which is so awesome. Thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight and previewing this super important game. I don't know when we're going to have another one this important between the Lions and the Vikings. It's hard to imagine that we are, but we did say that back in October. So, but if you guys can like and subscribe, we would so appreciate it. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's talk about the 5th seed, Will, because I know you have got it all figured out, what needs to happen and who they may potentially face and all that.
Well, I don't have all of it figured out, but I will say this. I pulled together a few things today that I was going to talk about tomorrow morning, which I still will. But obviously both teams want to be the 1 seed. That's the easiest path to the Super Bowl. You have 3 games, you get a first week bye. It's the best way to go. I mean, especially when you have a really good home crowd and you don't give up a bunch of tickets and allow the opponents to come into your stadium. Vikings fans allowed us in masses, by the way.
It was worse than Green Bay.
Yeah, we travel well. Being the 5th seed is the hardest path to the Super Bowl. And only the number 5th seed has ever. I'm sorry, hold on. Let me go back and read this again. Being the number 5 seed is the hardest path to the Super Bowl. As the only number 5 seed to ever make it to the Super Bowl was the 2007 Giants.
Wow.
That was not a good. That was not a good football team either. Like they had like a 19th ranked defense, and I think they had a 14th ranked offense. They were terrible. Somehow they won. The last number 4 seed to make it to the Super Bowl was the 2012 Ravens, and the last number 3 seed to make it to the Super Bowl was the 2006 Indianapolis Colts. The 2003 Carolina Panthers are the only NFC team to reach a Super Bowl as a number 3 seed. Only 3 number 3 seeds have ever reached an NFC championship game, and the last number 6 seed to reach the Super Bowl was the 2010 Packers. One of 2 number 6 seeds to win the championship. A wild card team making the Super Bowl is stronger than ever now because you got 2 14-2, teams with the Lions and the Vikings, but the odds are still in the favor of a team with a first round bye making the Super Bowl. Teams with a first round bye have made the Super Bowl 79.3% of the time. It's just not likely that anything but a 1 seed is going to make it to the Super Bowl. It's just not likely. I mean, the stats are there. But why would it be different for the Lions and the Vikings this season? Well, kind of like I just said, when has there been a 14-win team as a wild card and a 5th seed? Both of these teams would be winning a division if they were in any other division right now, right? So if it continues this way, my question is the NFL going to restructure some of these conferences a little bit? If you start to see that, the NFC North is going to continue to be this good, because I'm not expecting the Packers to stay down for long, and I'm definitely not expecting the Bears to stay down for much longer, even though I don't have any faith in them, period. But that's the path. And here's the other thing to think about. Even if you're the 5th seed, crazier things have happened. But if you're the 5th seed, you could still end up hosting a couple of home games. Depending on what happens through the first couple of weeks, you could still end up hosting an NFC championship game at a minimum. If everybody gets knocked out. So it can happen. I mean, look at what happened to the Lions last year. We ended up hosting, what was it? We played
what LA, was it? And then because Green Bay beat Dallas, because you play the lower seed. So anyway, then ended up getting Tampa.
We got Tampa at home.
Right.
So that was supposed to be a road game for us. Ended up being a home game.
Okay. Yeah. I've tried to play it out in my mind, like, how would they possibly get another home game? So I'm relieved to hear that it is possible, while it may be unlikely, that they could maybe have that NFC Championship home game, because I've never had an opportunity to go to one of those in my lifetime. And this may be the year that everything could change, which I hope so. Riley, if they do get the number 5 seed, who is the matchup? What team in the NFC would you least like to see the Lions play?
The Rams.
Okay.
And I feel like a lot of Lions fans are going to look at me and say that's crazy. I'm not necessarily saying that I think that they would beat the Lions, but you see a team so frequently at this point. They've played the Lions tough the playoff game. They played them tough the season opening game this year, and the Lions right now, the secondary is kind of the area of concern, and they've got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and no matter how you do it, it's going to be a challenge. But I think I'd rather play just about anybody other than the Rams.
Yeah, I fear them as well. Will, how do you feel about that?
I'm kind of in the same boat, and for a lot of the same reasons. But I mean, here's the difficult part of being in the playoffs, which we don't have a ton of experience with. When you have 3 NFC North teams in the same conference in the playoffs that know each other, if we all win, in the first round, all of those games are going to be tough. Because we see each other twice a year. It's going to be like facing the Rams. For us, the last few seasons, we've seen them a lot. And Matthew Stafford knows us. He knows us well. So it's almost like an extension of a divisional matchup with the Rams at this point, because we've seen them so many times. Same thing with the Bucs. They're in that same boat. So to be honest with you, no matter what team we face, we're screwed because we've been facing these teams a lot over the last few years, and we see the purple people eaters and the fudge packers, twice a year too. So it's just not shaping up to be a good situation. But honestly, I want the Packers again.
Oh, okay.
I can't stand the Packers.
No.
Even though Eric, my co-host, right, he really hates the Packers. I can't stand the Packers, but I have no problem rooting for them if it helps out, my teams.
Yeah,
I can't.
I mean, it's not like I'm dressing up in green and gold and painting my face and going to a game. No, I'm just saying, hey, that would be cool if you guys did this. At least try.
Who do the Vikings not want to face, Sally?
Oh my gosh, I've had a lot of confidence going in, but I think it's going to depend. I have said earlier this year, well, I'm not really scared of them facing anybody because it's just, you have that high from the previous week and you're like, oh, they're unstoppable. They've been able to come back. Sam Darnold is really hitting his stride and just playing so well. Whereas, earlier in that middle of the season, October-ish, things looked kind of dicey how that was going to go. So I have so much confidence in them, but we know playing 3 games on the road here to potentially get to the Super Bowl makes it so much harder. I would agree with you. I do fear the Rams. They're so hot going into this, and I know Philadelphia is really good. They're really good in the trenches, both sides, but I don't necessarily fear them, the team, as much as going to Philadelphia because we have an extremely bad track record going to Philadelphia as Vikings fans. They're always in prime time. They're always brutal. They're never close. And their fans have abused ours that tend to travel there and all of that, which I think most of us have learned the lesson and will not ever do that again. But so I don't want to play in Philadelphia either. Those would be the 2 that I would like to avoid at all costs. But probably Philadelphia more than LA if I had to choose.
So if I were to give you a scenario right now, which I think is very likely, I think this is what it's going to look like. Let's just say the Lions win on Sunday. So Lions are the 1 seed, and if Green Bay wins, if Washington beats Dallas, which is expected, if Tampa Bay beats the Saints, which is expected, if LA beats the Seabirds, or Sea Chickens, which is expected, if Broncos win, so on and so forth, it would be the Lions, obviously, with a week off. It would be Green Bay at Philly, and it would be Minnesota at Tampa, and it would be Washington at LA.
Okay.
That's about the best scenario, I think, for all of us. Otherwise, you flip-flop Minnesota and the Lions. It'd be Lions traveling to Tampa. Minnesota would be off. And so the 7th seed is Green Bay. And if Green Bay takes out Philly, then it's going to be Minnesota and Green Bay taking on each other. And it would be the Lions taking on Washington or LA in the 2nd round.
I say that I don't fear Green Bay compared to the other ones, but like we kind of just talked about, it's really hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year, 3 times in 1 season. So
it doesn't happen.
Right. The only plus, I guess, in that situation would be, I think then the Vikings would have the home game, correct? So wouldn't have to go to Lambeau. So that would be a plus, but good Lord, I'll never afford to get into that game. That game will be like 4 digits to even walk in the door. So I'm not looking forward to that. But you will actually mention before we started that there are tickets still available. They're like having a queue that Ticketmaster is releasing some for this Sunday.
Yeah, so I was checking out tickets online before we jumped on, and now the Ticketmaster has a queue to go in to get Lions tickets. So I signed into my regular account. And it says tickets are now on sale. To shop for tickets, please join the queue, and we will provide additional information. So let me join this queue real quick if I'm still logged in.
While he looks that up real quick, Sally, can I ask you a question? And just
of course,
I kind of feel like I know the answer that I've had ingrained in my head this whole time. Is Sam Darnold going to be back in Minnesota next season?
Oh gosh, everyone's favorite topic. Everyone's favorite topic. I think when I talked to you earlier this year, I said absolutely not. I don't see why it would happen. I don't think it benefits either side. But things have really changed since then, and I think that the Vikings would be silly to let him walk away after he has this type of a season and he's in the MVP conversation. How do you just let him walk away? I am in the definite minority in my fan base. If you look at, I believe it was oh my gosh, who today had a whole rant about how they have to go with Sam Darnold. Somebody in the chat let me know, but it's a national guy. If you read the comments on that, it's like I maybe saw one Vikings fan who was like, "Yeah, you got to keep Darnold." The rest of them, they're not into it, and I really can't understand why.
Yeah.
I think they fell so in love with JJ in this draft process, and we've waited so long to be able to draft another quarterback this early in the draft, and then I understand the argument of, hey, you just got rid of a quarterback, paying Kirk Cousins, millions and millions of dollars, and you couldn't invest in the rest of your roster, and now you've got a rookie, and all of that won't be a factor. I understand the argument, but for me, I think, how do you let a guy who's had so much success taking this team to 14 wins and let him walk away for something that isn't a sure thing? We're still dealing with a guy who next year is going to be his first season. There's no way in hell they're not going to have a regression with that. And to me, I feel like we didn't expect the Super Bowl window to be open this early. Surprise to everyone, it is. And especially with how good the division is, I didn't think that they would be able to compete in this division this year. No way in hell. So when the Packers are this good and the Lions are this good to be in this position, I don't know why you risk taking a step back. I don't get it. I think I know a lot of people want to franchise tag him. I don't even agree with that necessarily, because then why have the resource of JJ McCarthy sitting on the bench? I feel like trade him, get what you can get with him, put those resources back into the team in the draft this year to hopefully run it back next year and do it again. And, it was a great thought to have JJ McCarthy and all this, but I don't get how you let him walk away when he performed this well. I really
so tough.
don't.
He's only 27. Sam Darnold's only 27.
Yeah. Yes.
I think Sal, you just made some great points, and that's the first time I've heard a Vikings fan say trade JJ. But it makes a lot of sense.
It's a weak class. He was a first-round pick last year. He did have surgery, but it was a meniscus, which is the least severe of any knee injury. I believe that they could most likely get a first round. They're hurting for picks as it is because they gave up a lot the last couple of years. And another thing that people don't take into account often, that my colleague Tyler Fornes brought up a couple weeks ago, is that they're already on the books right now for Kirk Cousins for, I want to say, $28 million. So you add Sam's to that, they're already paying quarterback position $38 million. So I don't know. The window's open right now, so I don't get why you risk going back. But
yeah,
I think it makes perfect sense to keep Sam Darnold in Minnesota. It makes perfect sense. You're going to pay the guy $60 million. That's what he's going to get. He's going to get a $60 million contract. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to get rid of JJ. I think that it makes perfect sense to keep JJ waiting in the wings. You've got 5 years on him, so you got 4 more, to start next season. You've got 4 more seasons. And in the way that you can, construct Darnold's contract, you'll have an easier out in a couple of years to where you can trade him away and not lose your ass. And then you've got a guy that's ready. And if you look at what, the Packers unfortunately have done with all of their quarterbacks, it makes sense to sit behind a winner and behind somebody like Sam Darnold that can teach JJ McCarthy a lot, and he'll be ready to go. I would keep JJ and Sam Darnold, and you are set. If something happens to Sam, JJ is ready to rock and roll. And then you've got the best of both worlds. And you'll be able to afford it. I mean, it's not like JJ's contract is huge. What's it, $22 million? Over 4 or 5 years. So it's like $5 million a year.
I've never been fiscally responsible, so I don't know about all of that. But I'm in love with Sam Darnold. I don't want to see him go. Like I said, I know I'm in the minority. I'm surprised I'm not getting roasted in the chat, but that's how I feel. And I don't feel like you should leave the resources sitting on the bench. I mean, you guys forget we got Daniel Jones, so we're good.
I've totally forgot about that.
Oh, Daniel.
I'm kind of kidding, but go ahead.
Oh my God. You got Danny Dimes too. You guys are sitting you're in quarterback heaven over there.
Riches,
Exactly. But
JJ would be the first overall pick. From everything I've read, he would be the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. So, yeah.
I mean,
if they were to
he'd be high, I think. I know I see a lot of conflicting opinions about that. I've saw some people say second round and all. I don't know. It's a weak class, but we do have to start wrapping it up because we have been on here for an hour and a half, which was 30 minutes longer than we thought we were going to be. There's still 125 people in the chat, you guys, so that is so awesome. But before we get our game predictions, you guys, I want to make sure that we give you a plug. Everyone knows where to find you, what time you're on, and all of that.
So Rock Down Detroit Lions and Rise and Grind Morning Show are one of the same. So Rise and Grind Morning Show is weekdays, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's right. We go 2 hours every day. We're not, sissies like Sally that can only go 60. I'm just kidding, Sal.
Dave's got to go. It's not me. Dave's got to go.
You can catch us weekdays. And then I'm getting back to doing the night show. So probably Wednesday nights, popping on around 7 p.m. And then content all the time. So that's where you're going to find us. And then Riley will tell you about talking football at some point when it gets rolling. But Riley will tell you about talking football.
All right.
Yeah. Talking Football podcast. Again, that's where I interviewed Sally. I'll come back to this video after I can post the interview. It was a very good conversation I had with her. And then, I've been doing a lot of stuff with Will and with Eric on their show. But yeah, I'm part of Talking Football. It's talking_football. And you're going to see a lot more of Talking Football on the Rocked On Podcast Network. And thank you so much to Dave for producing and hanging out with us tonight.
Yes.
And being patient with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave, for letting us go late. And how long have you guys been doing both of your content? Riley, how long Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Riley, you can go first.
Yeah, Talking Football started 2019. Justin Treese and Austin Cunningham really spearheaded it. Dan Kiefer became part of it a couple years into it. And then it's been kind of the four of us until this last summer. That's when I started doing the interview. So it's been 6 years strong.
Okay, and let's get your game prediction.
37-34 Lions.
Oh, okay.
Man, you just cut right into it, Riley. So back in the preseason, before anything was happening, I said it was going to be 21-22 Vikings. And that's because this game was supposed to be meaningless. I had the Lions going 14-3 and locking up the 1 seed and locking up the NFC North at 14-3. Eric said 15-2. So now I need Eric to be right. I need the Lions to finish 15-2. So because of that, this is going to be a shootout. So I think the over-under is like 57 points or 56.5 points.
Mm-hmm.
So I see 34-31 Lions.
That is a really good score. Yeah, I am obviously going to go with the flip side of that. I'm going to go with Vikings 34 points, but they've got to be able to prevent these Lions from scoring 40 points. Absolutely, and I agree. It's going to be a shootout. Like I said earlier, it's going to come down to a couple plays, a couple stops, and potentially some turnovers. It's going to be one that I think we're going to be talking about for a long time, you guys. So I'm excited. But I would love to. Well, I guess I was going to say maybe we can chat like next week on the bye, but you guys will probably be busy. I'll be not busy at all, enjoying my bye week. But
yeah, right.
I'll be trying to find stuff to fill the time with. But thank you guys again so much for joining. I'm so glad that both of our audiences were able to come together here in the chat and have some fun. For the most part, I saw everybody being respectful, but it's been a really fun episode, you guys. So may the best team win this Sunday.
All right. Yeah, go Lions. And thanks again, Dave, for producing and everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Sal, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. SKOL.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a big shout out goes to Sal and her guests on this Vikings First and SKOL production, partnered with the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks, everyone. And SKOL.